So the rest of this presentation is pretty much going to be talking about these 4 phases with some extra references and stuff. So let's kind of go through them. So the first part with kind of your groundwork, you're doing your kind of your background research. You want to know more about your community. You want to know about the history of the community. You know, how long has that community been there? What are the demographics? You know, what things have existed before? Was there a Pillsbury plant, or was there a steel industry or something, right? You want to know the history of your town and what happened there. Because that could kind of influence, you know, for example, I lived around Pittsburgh in a huge steel industry, right? So I kind of have to keep in mind that a lot of, especially the elder folks in this area, are used to steel industry stuff. So you kind of have to talk about that when you're talking to them. They're thinking of the heyday of steel, and steel is gone, and we don't have that. And we don't really want dirty industry like that anyway. There's better ways to produce steel now, in addition to, you know, all kinds of other green industry. But knowing that history allows you to talk to them better, relate to them better, and relate to their experiences better, and build trust and all, you know, all the stuff we talked about. So you'll want to do this power mapping exercise, sort of, where you understand, once you know more about the history and the demographics and who's there, you can ask these questions about what are the connections between all the elected officials, between all the decision makers in your community, all the community organizers, community leaders, you know, maybe, you know, churches or something in your area, right? If there's a particularly influential church or something, you want to know who all these people are, who all these organizations are, and what the relationships are, right? Some of them might work together. Some of them might be more hostile to each other. Some of them might give money to each other, right? It's important to know these things so that when you're deciding what to do with your advocacy, mobilizing, organizing campaigns, you know who influences who, right? And who to talk to be on your side, and so to speak, what you're up against, right? who are the people that are supporting the thing that you don't want to happen. So there's a lot of ways to find this information. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
When it comes to power mapping, I think you want to do 2 power maps, right? You want to do your community power map, which is what Garrett's been talking about, right? Who are the decision makers? Who are the people, who are the, you know, activists and organizations that are on the ground doing the work already, you know, right? And that can be important because you don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? So who can we work with on things? You know, oh, we're really interested in this issue. Let's talk to this organization. Let's partner up for some actions. Let's share the workload. You know, let's spread it off the, you know, with any kind of small organization like this, it's usually filled with overworked organizers, overspread, overextended organizers. So, you know, you do that, and it can help you, you know, really understand your town and how it works. One thing that's not on there that I talk about on all of these is, in a lot of our communities, there's no community left. The idea of a neighborhood, the idea of a community, you know, an integrated community is kind of gone. You know, my mom lived in suburbs, you know, and didn't know and didn't like most of her neighbors. They'd never really spoken, you know, they didn't interact with one another. But especially in working class communities, there are often still very much a vibrant, you know, community life. And what I always tell people when they're, you know, knocking doors in the community is, you don't want to know who the precincts and committee person is necessarily. You want to know who the block mom is. Who's the person that knows everybody? Who's the person that if you build that real relationship with, 30 people come with her because they trust her. Right? And it doesn't have to be a mom. This is, you know, that's just a term. But, you know, who is that person? Who's the anchor of the community? Because oftentimes it's not the person with official power. That person with official power is often a problem for the people that actually do exercise a level of social power within the community. And the other kind that's, you know, you do that community type things. You can kind of plot out who are you going to work with, what are your stumbling blocks going to be, and then you do a personal power map, right? Who do I know? How many degrees away from this decision maker are we in our organization, right? I live in a somewhat smaller, I live in a town of 100,000. I grew up in a town of 2,500, but in those situations, it's a little easier to know people. But when you're in a city like Pittsburgh, right, you may just know who this key person you need. There could be an organizing superstar that you just know of by reputation. Well, who knows him? Who knows her, right? And you start doing these power maps and you find out like, well, shit, my son goes to daycare with, their niece. And now all of a sudden we know a direct route. Like, how can we go talk to this person directly? How can we do that kind of engagement? So once you kind of get that power map picture of the community, do your individual power map, right? And that individual power map will come in really big handy when it comes to the door knocking and growing your organizational structure and in growing your organization, because that will give you your initial people you go talk to, right? Part of that power map is saying, make a list of every single person you know that would generally support the issues you're working on, and you can start talking to them, right? So you want to do, it's like a double map. Well, a micro and a macro map is exactly what it is. A community and a personal.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like put them both on transparent paper, right, and overlay them and see where your connections are. And you may really want to work on this issue, and you do your power map and you find out, what, we're not connected on that issue. We need to build relationships there, but we're ready to roll on this other issue. Where when we did our power map, we found out that we've got a lot of connections into the existing movement, and we can pretty easily move in and with trusted relationships. So it can help your prioritization for sure too.
Yeah, having the map helps a lot to to organize people, to figure out who you need to talk to, and also to help decide with your messaging. So I give some examples here. There's plenty of other places that you can learn. What happened here? Participants can see your application. Oh, I don't know what happened. Whatever. Anyway, there's lots of places you can find power mapping data, but for example, if you're looking at political campaigns, if you're looking at elected officials, they probably filed some kind of financial report with either the state, if they ran for local or state office, or the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, if they're a Congress member. So you can look up their financial contributions and see who contributes to them, both individuals and PACs, right? So you can get a sense of what industries support them, for example.
An example of that, would be, so let's say you're starting a Green Party and you're in an area where, to your knowledge, there's been no Green Party, right? So the network isn't there already. But we have presidential elections, we have things like that, right? So you can go and pull your FEC list and filter through that and find out who in my county donated to Howie in 2020, who donated to Jill in 2016, who donated to Jill in 2012, right? Who donated to Bernie, right? Because there's some overlap with our issues there. So you can use those FEC reports to kind of build your list. I know someone who organizes, and they like to talk about how deep red of a location they're in.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, and I got mad one day and I went online and I looked it up after the 2016 election, and I said, 5,000 people in your county voted for Jill. You're not alone. You just have
right.
to find them, right? Another way, I just got news yesterday from the Illinois Board of Elections, voter data, right? On this little tiny flash drive is the contact information for every registered voter in a U.S. congressional district in Illinois. On this one is every single voter in Cook County, which is where Chicago is. If I went downstairs, I've got one for every single district in a suburban congressional district, right? And as a political party in Illinois, we get it for free. We fill out a form and they call me, and I go and I pick up these flash drives. And now we know who's registered in our districts. We can see their past their past primary votes and things in Illinois, and what data you'll get differs from state to state. But it's one of the benefits of actually being official, and contacting your state party and getting support there is that they may have or be able to access voter lists as a party or a candidate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, voter lists, FEC or state data, tax filings, all that stuff can kind of help find out more information about, political campaigns, voters, nonprofits that are in your area. You might also want to partner with labor unions. You can look up labor unions that are registered near you through the Federal Labor Relations Board, for example. If the coffee shop had a union vote recently, you can look at their filing for that. And of course, you can find lots of statistics from the U.S. Census, for example, to get a sense of, how many people live in your area and where they live at, and what's the average median salaries in your area and things like that, so that you can kind of customize your message.
General past election data is also really good, right? If you're going to run for city council, one of the first things you should know is, on average, how many votes do I need to win? And you can find that out by looking at past elections, see how many votes were cast on average over a few elections, how many votes the winner got over a few elections. And then that can help you start to set the metrics that we talked about earlier, right? Okay, I need 1,000 votes. How many doors do I need to knock to get that, do I think? It can help you qualify your need, help you figure out, actually define what you need to achieve to have success. And also always remember, success doesn't always mean winning. If your organization grew and is stronger after a political campaign, even though you lost, there's success there.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of ways to define success, and as third-party candidates and third-party organizers, we're playing on a rigged field, right? The major parties have very much written repression into the law. Today, like I said, today was voting day in Illinois. I couldn't vote. Greens are banned from participating in the state primaries, and they didn't have a nonpartisan ballot when I walked into the precinct. They said you can choose Republican or Democrat, and I walked out, right? Because I'm not either one of those things. So we've got to have a little bit of realism in terms of addressing or acknowledging the material conditions that we're organizing under, and setting our goals appropriately. And then apparently for the last point, I jumped the gun and did that a little early.
Yeah, and a lot of times, especially when it comes to campaigns, historical data shows that a lot of times, it seems pretty simple, but like the candidate that's most well known is probably the one that's going to win, because people are not happy with Republicans and Democrats. They want to vote for something else. It's really like a numbers game. It's getting enough people to know that you exist and that you're an alternative that you win. And so a lot of Greens, let's say, will not win their first campaign for office, but they'll win the second or third time that they run, because nobody knew who they were the first time. But that first campaign got, a third of the community to know who they are. And they started to build trust. They started to build connections, so that the second time they ran, they had those connections from the go. And so now they could win. Now they had that. So we have to keep that in our organizing mindset, that, it takes time to build any organizing movement.
Yeah. And so something I just thought about when you were talking about that, and, it kind of comes down to qualifying the lead. Who are we actually trying to talk to, right? Who are we trying to build a base from? And one of the things that, as independent socialist organizers, we should look for are the people that aren't included in the voter data, right? The largest voting block every election is non-voters, and in most elections they're a majority. And I can tell you from the political behavior, the normal political behavior of Republicans and Democrats, they aren't talking to non-voters. Democrats, when you get a walk list from a Democratic Party operative, it mainly includes strong Democratic supporters. They're only trying to turn out their own base. And the same goes for the Republicans, right? And that leads to the distrust in working class, because most of these non-voters are, probably in working class communities, and it leads to the rightful distrust of politicians. So when you're pulling your voter data as Greens, one thing we should be saying is, where are the areas where the fewest number of people voted, right? And that's an organizing opportunity for us. Because it's an area that 70% of the people voted either Republican or Democrat, there's a much smaller piece of the potential pie that we can get into, right? They're already spoken for. So when we get this kind of data, you want to be looking at, the positive stuff for you in there, but you also want to be looking at the negative space. You want to be looking for the holes. Because if you could, Sherry Hunkala in Philadelphia, in her district, in her state house district, when she ran in, I think it was 28, might have been 2017 because it was a special election, but her district, 0 people voted for Trump. 0 people voted for Trump. I don't know the stats, but I would bet that their voter turnout is probably around 30% in that district, maybe, right? And she almost won with the write-in campaign, right? They had to kick her off the ballot using the shenanigans that the Democrats of Pennsylvania are known for. They literally lied to her. They told her all of her paperwork was in, and then when they were like, "Oh, we don't have this one," but they waited till the day after it could be turned in to say it, kicked her off the ballot, right? But it's a working class community that Sherry's been organizing in her entire life. And she sees it as an opportunity, whereas Republicans and Democrats see those empty spaces, those non-voting communities, as black hole, spaces to be avoided. They ignore them and write them off. So as Greens and as independent socialist organizers, we want to be looking for those places where people aren't participating right now, the people who have refused to participate in their own oppression. It's a key organizing area that we need to see.
Yeah. So, one way that we can reach these non-voters is the second thing on here. When we're doing our groundwork research, there's a lot that goes into power mapping. We also want to start doing surveys and reaching out to people in the community, the actual people that work there, live there, and finding out what are the issues that they're concerned about. What are the things that they want to see action on that we can maybe work with them on. So there's a bunch of ways to do it. You could do mailers and phone calls and all, but door knocking is the best way to have that deep conversation that's going to build trust. So you can go to their door and ask them a few questions. But you could potentially mail it to them. You could post a survey on social media, depending on what you're going for. The main thing is just making sure that your survey is asking the appropriate questions to get the feedback you actually need to take action. Sometimes folks will ask these really rigged questions, right? And it's not useful to understanding how the community actually feels about issues. You want to make sure that it's open enough that they can talk about things that they want, and it's not just confirming what you think they want.